My wife stole $200, $0 from our joint account and secretly sold our family home to pay off her gambling debts, then turned around and sued me for half the property, even though I had no idea she was under suspicion or hiding all this from me. I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this. Honestly, I thought I knew everything about my wife, Lisa. We'd been married for 8 years, and up until about 6 months ago, things seemed normal, routine, maybe a little boring, but stable. We had a nice house, decent jobs, 2 kids I loved more than anything. But then everything started to fall apart, and I realized I was living with someone I didn't really know. The craziest part, I only found out because of a series of small, seemingly unrelated events that added up to a total nightmare. It started with little things. Lisa began to act distant. She was more irritable, snapping at me over nothing and spending more time on her phone. I'd catch her sneaking around, hiding her screen when I walked into the room, or she'd suddenly cancel plans last minute, claiming she was too tired or had to work late. But I brushed it off, thinking maybe she was just stressed. We had a rough year financially with some unexpected bills, but nothing that should made her act this way. Then one evening I noticed her phone was left unattended on the kitchen counter. I wasn't snooping, but I was curious. I glanced at the screen and saw a message thread that made my stomach drop. It was from a number I didn't recognize, and the texts were flirty, way more than friendly. Things like "can't wait to see you tonight" and "you're the only one who understands me." I felt a cold wave of shock. My heart was pounding and I couldn't believe what I was reading. I knew Lisa was cheating, but seeing the proof hit me like a punch to the gut. I didn't confront her right then. I needed to be sure. Over the next few days, I started noticing more strange things. Her phone kept going off late at night. She was secretive about her social media, and she was unusually defensive whenever I asked her about her whereabouts or her friends. One time, I even saw her quickly delete a message from her phone. That was when I knew I had to dig deeper. The real bombshell came a week later when I decided to check our joint bank account online. I'd never done this before, but I was trying to piece together what was going on. And what I saw made my blood run cold. Over $200, $0 had been withdrawn in the past 3 months. The money was gone, completely wiped out. I couldn't believe it. We had saved that money for years, planning to buy a new car, maybe take a family vacation. Instead, it was gone, and I had no idea where it went. I started digging through our financial records, and that's when I discovered the truth. Lisa had sold our family home, our only real asset, without telling me. She'd secretly arranged to sell it to cover her gambling debts. I found the listing on a real estate website, and the sale had gone through 3 weeks ago. She lied about everything. She told me she was saving for a new job or investing in some side business. But the reality was she was sinking our family into debt and shame. I was furious. I confronted her that night, and she spun some bullshit about how she needed the money because she was under a lot of pressure and made a mistake. She claimed the gambling was just a one-time thing that she'd stopped and that she was trying to fix it. But I knew better. I'd seen the bank statements, the messages. She was lying through her teeth. All I could think about was how she had betrayed me, betrayed our family, and lied about everything that mattered. That's when I realized I wasn't just dealing with a cheating wife. I was dealing with someone who was capable of destroying everything we built just to feed her addiction and her lies. I felt a mix of heartbreak, rage, and helplessness. How could she do this? How could she lie to me for so long? I had trusted her, loved her, and now I was left with nothing but a pile of broken trust and a future that looked darker than ever. I knew I had to do something. But what? I wasn't just going to sit back and let her get away with it. I started planning my next move, knowing that the truth was only the beginning of what was coming. I didn't want to be a victim in this story. I wanted to be the one who took control. I just didn't realize how far that would go or how much more I'd have to lose before I was done. After I found out about the sale of the house and the missing money, everything changed. The shock was still fresh, but anger started to take over. Lisa kept insisting she was sorry, that she didn't mean for it to get this bad, and that she was going to make it right. Yeah, right, I knew better. I could see through her bullshit now. She always was good at lying, but her eyes gave her away. There was a flicker of guilt, but mostly there was that bitchy, entitled attitude she always had when she felt cornered or threatened. The worst part was her blatant denial about the affair. She'd tell me, "You're overreacting," or "You're just insecure," whenever I brought up the texts or the late-night calls, but I'd seen enough to know the truth. I'd caught her sneaking out at night, her phone buzzing with messages from some guy named Jake. I even found a hotel receipt in her purse from a week ago. She lied about everything. She told me she was out with her friends, that she was working late, that she was stressed. But I knew better. I'd seen her with him in the car in public, and I'd even seen her wearing his hoodie once. That's when I decided I couldn't just sit around anymore. I needed a plan. I couldn't let her keep lying and cheating without consequences. I started collecting evidence, screenshots of texts, copies of bank statements, photos of her with Jake. I wanted everything documented. If I was going to do something drastic, I needed to be sure I had enough proof to back it up. One night I followed her. She told me she was going out with her sister, but I knew better. I tracked her car to a cheap motel about 20 miles away. She was in there with him. I stood outside, watching her go into that room, her face flushed, her hair a mess. I felt this strange mixture of rage and heartbreak. I wanted to storm in there, to scream at her, to tear her apart, but I stayed quiet. Instead, I took pictures from outside the window, enough to prove she was lying to my face. That was when I realized I had to take control of the situation. I couldn't let her keep doing this, hurting everyone around her. I started researching divorce laws, thinking about how to protect myself financially. I knew she had already sold the house, so I had to act fast if I wanted to keep anything for myself. I also started talking to a lawyer just to see what my options were. It was clear she'd been hiding her debts, her affair, and her deception for months. She thought she could get away with everything, but I was done being blind. The next day I sat her down. I told her I knew everything: the affair, the money, the house. Her face twisted into this nasty, bitchy glare. She told me I was overreacting, that I was paranoid, that I was turning this into some kind of drama. But I didn't care. I was done listening to her lies. I told her I was filing for divorce. Her reaction: she started crying, begging, accusing me of being the bad guy. She said I was controlling, that I was jealous, and that I was ruining her life. But I wasn't about to let her manipulate me anymore. I saw right through her act. I knew she was planning her next move, probably trying to spin a story that made her look innocent. But I also knew I had enough evidence to prove she was the one who destroyed our family. I was furious, but I was also determined. I had been betrayed in the worst way, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it, not this time. I started to think about what I really wanted. I didn't want her to take everything, even though she'd already sold our house. I wanted her to pay for what she did, and I wanted to keep what was left of my dignity. I knew revenge wasn't just about hurting her. It was about making her feel the same pain she caused me, in a way she'd never see coming. I was ready to fight dirty if I had to expose her lies, her debts, her infidelity. I wasn't just going to walk away. I was going to make sure she knew I wasn't the fool she thought I was. And so I started planning my next move. It was only the beginning. The real game was about to start, and I was determined to come out on top. She thought she could lie her way out of this, but I knew better now. I had everything I needed to turn this nightmare around. She made her choices. Now it was her turn to face the consequences. Once I decided I was serious about taking control, I started to put my plan into motion. The first thing I did was hire a private investigator. I needed concrete proof of her affair, her gambling, and everything else she'd been hiding. I couldn't rely solely on my evidence. I wanted irrefutable facts. The pie was discreet, professional, and within a week, he came back with everything I needed. Pictures of her with Jake at that seedy motel, receipts from the casino she'd been frequenting, and even some recorded phone calls where she was clearly planning her next move. Seeing those photos and hearing her voice, I felt a surge of anger. But more than that, I felt a cold resolve. I wasn't going to let her keep manipulating me. I knew I had to be strategic about this. I also dug into our financial records with the help of my lawyer. Turns out, Lisa had taken out multiple loans under my name, forged my signature, and racked up thousands more in gambling debts. She'd been doing all this behind my back for months, hiding it from me, all while pretending everything was fine. I realized I had enough to go to court for a divorce, but I also wanted to make her pay for what she'd done. I wanted her to understand that betrayal has consequences. I started gathering everything: proof of the sale of the house, the bank statements, the texts, the photos. I wanted a paper trail so she couldn't lie her way out of it. I also talked to my lawyer about how to handle the property division. She'd already sold our house, but I was determined to get my fair share of whatever was left and to prevent her from draining any more of my money. Meanwhile, Lisa kept up her act, playing the victim whenever I confronted her. She'd cry, scream, accuse me of being paranoid, jealous, controlling, but I wasn't buying it anymore. I saw through her lies. She told me she was trying to fix things, that she loved me, that she was sorry. Sorry. Sorry doesn't pay off the mortgage or cover the debts she racked up. Sorry doesn't erase the betrayal of our marriage vows or the fact that she had been sneaking around with some guy and gambling away our future. I also started to focus on my own emotional health. I was angry, yes, but I knew I needed clarity. I read everything I could about infidelity, betrayal, and how to protect myself legally. I reached out to a counselor just to process what I was feeling: anger, heartbreak, confusion. It was hard. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut, not just by her actions, but by the realization that I'd been living with a lie all these years. I'd always thought she was my partner, my best friend. Turns out, she'd been secretly working against me. One of the most unexpected events came when I found out Lisa had been secretly contacting her lawyer behind my back, trying to negotiate some kind of settlement. She was trying to spin it like she was the victim, that I was overreacting and that I should just forgive her. That's when I knew I had to be even more careful. She was good at manipulation, good at lying. I couldn't let her gaslight me into thinking I was the crazy one. I decided I'd take control of the situation by going to court first. I filed for divorce, demanding full custody of the kids and asking for a fair division of assets. I also made sure to include all the evidence of her debts, her affair, and her deception. I knew she'd try to fight me, but I was prepared. I wanted her to see that I wasn't going to be the pushover anymore. I was done being the nice guy. This was about justice, about protecting what little I had left of my dignity and my future. While all this was happening, Lisa's attitude grew increasingly hostile. She started accusing me of trying to ruin her, saying I was a jealous, controlling bastard who just wanted to punish her. She even tried to manipulate the kids, telling them I was the bad guy and that I did love them anymore. That made me sick. I knew I had to keep my composure, stay focused on the facts, and not let her drag me down into her chaos. In the end, I realized that trust was completely broken. I couldn't fix this marriage, no matter how much I wanted to. What hurt the most was knowing she'd lied to me for so long, betrayed everything we built, and used me for her own selfish needs. But I also understood that I had a choice: keep fighting or accept that some damage can't be repaired. I chose to fight, not just for the money or the house, but for my sanity, my dignity, and my future with my kids. I knew this wasn't over yet, but I was finally taking control of what was left of my life. The court date came sooner than I expected, and I was ready. I had all my evidence organized: screenshots, bank statements, the photos of her with Jake, the fake signatures, everything. I knew Lisa would try to spin her story, paint herself as the victim, but I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I'd spent weeks preparing my case, working closely with my lawyer to anticipate her moves. I wanted to make sure she understood that I wasn't just some pushover anymore. The courtroom was tense. Lisa sat across from me, her face a mix of contempt and fake innocence. She kept trying to smile and act like everything was fine, but I could see the flicker of panic in her eyes. She knew she was cornered. Her lawyer was doing her best to downplay her debts, her affair, and her role in the sale of our home, but I had the evidence. I was ready to expose her lies. When it was my turn to speak, I laid everything out clearly. I told the judge about the missing money, the house sale, the affair, the forged signatures, and the gambling debts. I presented the photos, the recordings, and the bank statements. I made it very clear that Lisa had been dishonest from the start, that she'd been actively working against our marriage for months. I told the court that I wanted full custody of the kids, a fair division of assets, and that Lisa should be held accountable for her actions. Lisa's lawyer tried to argue that I was just jealous, that I was trying to control her, but I cut her off. I pointed out that her client had lied, cheated, and manipulated her way into destroying our family. The judge listened carefully, asking questions, and reviewing all the evidence I presented. It was obvious she was taking everything seriously. The most surprising moment was when the judge asked Lisa directly about the sale of the house. She hesitated, then finally admitted she'd sold it without telling me, claiming she needed the money because she was under so much pressure. She tried to cry to look innocent, but her words rang hollow. I could see right through her. The judge wasn't buying her sob story, and in her ruling she made it clear that Lisa had acted in bad faith, that her actions were damaging and irresponsible. The court awarded me full custody of the kids, which was a relief. I wanted to protect them from her chaos. As for the property, the judge ordered Lisa to pay back the remaining debts she'd accumulated, and she was ordered to surrender any claim to the proceeds from the house sale. The judge also issued a restraining order, barring Lisa from contacting me or the kids directly unless through legal channels. When I walked out of the courthouse that day, I felt a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. I'd fought hard, and I'd won some battles, but the war was far from over. Lisa was furious, of course. She tried to scream and curse at me in the hallway, calling me a greedy bastard, a controlling asshole, and a bunch of other things I didn't bother to listen to. I just kept my head down and walked away, knowing I'd done everything I could. In the days that followed, Lisa's anger turned to silence. She stopped fighting, stopped trying to contact me, and mostly stayed out of sight. I think she realized she'd lost control. I stayed focused on rebuilding my life, making sure the kids were okay, and healing from the betrayal. I also began the process of financial recovery, closing joint accounts, refinancing the house before she could try to claim anything more, and setting up a new secure future for myself and my children. Looking back, I can't help but feel a strange sense of closure. I know I was by her lies, her affair, her reckless spending, and her betrayal. But I also learned a lot about myself, about resilience, about standing up for what's right, and about not letting someone else's greed and deception destroy me. The whole ordeal has left scars, sure, but it's also made me stronger. I realize now that sometimes the only way to truly move on is to face the truth head-on, no matter how painful it is. And that's exactly what I did. After the court ruling, I thought I'd finally get some peace, but things didn't exactly calm down. Lisa was furious, and her anger simmered just beneath the surface. She refused to accept defeat quietly. She started making her moves behind the scenes, sending angry messages, trying to manipulate the kids, and even attempting to threaten me into dropping the case. It was clear she was trying to fight dirty, to turn the situation around in her favor any way she could. I knew I had to stay one step ahead. I kept all the evidence safe, documented every interaction, and made sure I had a solid legal team watching my back. I also took steps to protect the kids from her influence. I kept her out of their lives as much as possible, only allowing supervised visits and always under the watch of a counselor or mediator. I didn't want her to use the kids as pawns. I'd seen her try that before, and I refused to let her manipulate them with her lies. Meanwhile, I started to focus on rebuilding my own life. I got a new job, one that paid well enough to support us comfortably, and I began the long process of healing. I still felt betrayed, angry, and hurt, but I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I realized I'd spent so many years trying to hold everything together, just going through the motions. Now, I was finally taking control of my future. The most unexpected turn came when Lisa reached out to me again, trying to negotiate a settlement. She claimed she was sorry and begged for a second chance, promising she'd change. She even said she'd seek help for her gambling addiction and promised to be a better mother. I was skeptical. After everything, I knew her words were just a tactic to get back on my good side or to sway the court. I told her straight that I'd heard enough of her lies. I wasn't interested in giving her another shot. I wanted her to face the consequences of her actions. I made it clear that I was moving on and that her attempts at manipulation wouldn't work anymore. I also warned her that if she kept pushing, I'd take legal action to prevent her from seeing the kids unsupervised until she proved she was serious about changing. The truth was, I didn't want to keep fighting her forever, but I also knew I couldn't let her walk all over me. I had to protect my peace, my children, and my own sanity. The betrayal had cut deep, but I was learning to live with it, learning to forgive not her, but myself for staying so long in a relationship that was rotten from the start. In the end, I started focusing on the future. I enrolled in some financial planning courses, trying to rebuild what she'd tried to destroy. I also began therapy to process all the pain, anger, and disappointment. It wasn't easy, but I knew I had to do it for myself and for my kids. We deserved stability and honesty, and I was determined to give that to them. Looking back, I realized that betrayal teaches you who your real friends are, and it forces you to confront your own strength. I learned that no matter how much someone lies and manipulates, the truth has a way of coming out. I also learned that sometimes you have to fight dirty to protect what's yours. It's not about revenge, it's about justice, about making sure the people who hurt you aren't allowed to get away with it. So now, I'm slowly rebuilding. The pain still lingers, but it's less sharp. I'm more cautious, but I'm also more aware of what I deserve. I don't regret what I did or how I fought for myself. If anything, I wish I'd seen the signs earlier, but better late than never. Life's a learning process, and betrayal like this only makes you tougher in the end. I've come out of it with a clearer mind and a stronger heart, ready to face whatever comes next. Now that everything's settled, or at least as settled as it's going to get, I've had some time to reflect on what this whole nightmare taught me. Honestly, I don't think I'll ever fully get over the betrayal, but I've learned a lot about myself in the process. The biggest lesson: never ignore the small signs. Those little things I brushed off, her irritability, secretive behavior, late nights, those were all warning signs I chose to dismiss because I didn't want to believe the worst. Looking back, I see how blind I was, but I also understand that nobody's perfect, and sometimes you're just too close to see what's really happening. I also learned that trust is fragile. Once it's broken, it's almost impossible to get back. But more importantly, I learned that you can survive even the deepest betrayals if you're willing to face the truth head-on. I had to accept that my marriage was over, that Lisa's actions had irreparably damaged what we once had. That realization was hard, but it was also freeing. It forced me to stop blaming myself, to stop making excuses, and to start focusing on what I could control: my own future. The financial fallout was brutal. Losing the house, the savings, and discovering her debts and lies was devastating. But I managed to pull myself out of that hole. I cut ties with her, protected my kids, and started over. I found new purpose in rebuilding my life, not just financially but emotionally. I sought therapy, leaned on friends, and learned to forgive myself for staying as long as I did. Forgiveness isn't about excusing her behavior. It's about releasing the anger that eats you from the inside. I still get angry sometimes, but I don't let it control me anymore. The most surprising part: I found a new sense of strength I didn't know I had. Betrayal can shatter your world, but it also reveals your resilience. I learned that I don't need someone who lies and cheats to be happy. I can stand on my own, provide a stable life for my kids, and be better for myself. That's what I want others to take from this. Pay attention to the signs. Don't be afraid to fight for what's right, and never let someone's lies define you. Finally, I want to say this: trust your instincts. If something feels off, don't ignore it. Be honest with yourself about what you see and feel. And if you're in a situation like mine, know that it's okay to walk away. It's okay to say enough is enough. You deserve honesty, respect, and loyalty, not betrayal and lies. Life is too short to waste it on people who don't value you. I've learned that the hard way, but I'm grateful for the lessons. Now I'm finally ready to move forward, stronger and wiser than ever.